I'm Ellen Philor. I'm the PhD student as part of the East India Company at Home at UCL. And I'm going to talk about, I mainly look at the Scottish borders, and I'm going to talk about one of the families that I look at, and that's the Malcolm family of Burnfoot. And this is a family of George Malcolm, and he has 17 children, spanning the period 1762 to 1782. And 10 of these are boys, and they're the ones that historians have mainly looked at. And these are the books that historians tend to write on them. Sen Malcolm, The Life of Major General Sir John Malcolm, 1769 to 1833. But I actually want to argue that we can't really look at these people in isolation. Instead, we should be looking at them as a whole family. It's a whole family imperial project. And as a quote, "It is my earnest desire that all of my family should cling together like a bundle of rods." And this is said by Alexander Pringle in relation to the Malcolms. And this idea of rods, it's obviously not geographical proximity that is binding them together, because these people are in Gibraltar, they're in the West Indies, St Helena, Malta, India, Persia. So it's not geographical proximity, it's how else they're binding themselves together. And most obviously is through the letters that are exchanged from these places to their home in Burnfoot. It's also about the objects that they sent home, but it's also about their sisters that remain at home and what their sisters do for this family. And I want to look at three main ways that the sisters bind this family together and make them imperially successful. It is left to his third oldest sister, Mina Malcolm, and she looks after it, and she builds it up, and she stays in the house to make sure that the workmen are doing their job. And she chooses the wallpaper, she chooses some furnishings, etc. But it's not just this improvement, this physical improvement that these sisters do. They also look after the children that their brothers sent home, because none of these sisters have their children of their own, so they look after their nieces and nephews, and they educate them for the next generation of imperialism. They raise their cousin, and he's called Charles Pasley. And afterwards, about 20 years later, when he's serving in Malta, she writes him a letter and says, "I'm so happy we set up a correspondence, because I was the first person who first taught you how to write letters. In exchange, will you send me some seaweed from Malta? I trust you because you're a responsible person, and it needs a responsible person to pick nice seaweed." And she sets this up in a museum. She builds a cottage in the grounds of the family house, and she creates a museum. And her brothers and her friends and her cousins send her back multiple things for this museum. They send her bits that are chopped off the staircase at Persepolis. They send her engravings from India, from Mexico, and they send her natural curiosities from all over the globe. So in this very provincial area of Scotland, you end up with this fantastic collection of imperial goods that she has, put together, arranged and gathered. So I think that most of all demonstrates how imperialism can be seen as a collaborative familial project, and it's this form of female colonialisation that is complementary to their brothers, but is also very different to the physical, violent form that they enact. It appears far more gentle, but in actual fact it's very important as well. But the most extraordinary thing is that these people aren't unusual. Having a family of 17 isn't that unusual, and it's precisely the reason that Scots go into empire so much, is because their families are so large. This is a way to deal with having an excess population of virile young men. You send them off to India. And it's this overlooking of these minor members that leads to a very distorted picture. We only look at this very successful as opposed to the moderately successful, or the people who aren't successful at all. And by incorporating them in, we see far more clearly hopes and fears that are crushed at an earlier age, and I think it shows a different form of imperial drive.